No, you got it exactly right. And what I will tell you about identity is we have 85-year-old, grandmothers that get through this process every single day. Like it's incredible to me, right? It's incredible to me that people, that aren't digital natives, right, are getting through the most complicated technology ever. Like our technology is like world class ID tech, world class, right? And 85-year-old, grandmothers can get through our system no problem. In 2 minutes, by the way, it takes.
Welcome to Tech Travels, hosted by the seasoned tech enthusiast and industry expert, Steve Woodard. With over 25 years of experience and a track record of collaborating with the brightest minds in technology, Steve is your seasoned guide through the ever-evolving world of innovation. Join us as we embark on an insightful journey exploring the past, present, and future of tech under Steve's expert guidance.
Welcome back, fellow travelers. On today's episode, we're going to dive into the topic of identity in Web3 and its impact to customers and why they really need to understand what digital identity is, and also help us understand really kind of what it's all about. Today, we're thrilled to have Jeffrey Schwartz. Jeffrey is the founder of and the CEO of Dentity, a company dedicated to helping customers build trust online through streamlined and reusable identity verification solutions. Jeff has a rich history of working with multiple public companies and has extensive experience in launching startups and brings a wealth of knowledge to our discussion today. He's also served on various public and charitable boards and has been an Aspen Institute Fellow for over 2 decades. Jeffrey also holds a doctorate from the University of Southern California, which is based in Los Angeles. Jeffrey, it's great to have you on the show today. Welcome.
Thank you, Steve. After that introduction, I can only disappoint you. That was very generous, and I thank you for being so kind to me. Usually they're not. People aren't so kind to me.
I really wanted to take our audience on this topic around identity, and who better than somebody who is a CEO of a company who specifically works in this space. So to really kind of help our listeners, just kind of give us a real kind of foundational understanding of really what, in simple terms, what is Web3 identity, and how does it really typically differ from just the traditional type of identities that are managed by the big tech companies?
So there's a couple questions there. The first question is, what is identity? And I think the second question is, what is Web3? So let's take the first question. So the first question, what is identity? The one point I want to make to your listeners is that identity is a more encompassing term, and it doesn't mean your identifiers. So most people think of identity and they say, well, it's my name, rank, and serial number. It's my digits on my license and my social security number. Those are your identifiers, and they're part of your identity, but your identity is much bigger, Steve. I hold over 150 credentials in my wallet that paint the picture of who Jeff Schwartz is. I'm a member of AARP. I have my AAA card. I bank here. I give to all these different charitable organizations, and they have credentials that say that I'm a donor. And so I think of identity as a more a more expressive term, right? I mean, certainly we do ID verification, which is about your identifiers, right? Who are you, and are you a real person? Are you human? And what's your driver's license number or your passport number? In fact, I think we do over 16,000 documents now in 200 countries. So we do that. We do identifiers, but we also work with a number of companies that issue credentials for membership. Like the National Notary Association, for example. So I want to level set the term identity versus identifiers. And when I say identity, I mean a kind of a more expressive identity, a more encompassing term. So that's question one. Question two is, what is Web3? And I'm also out there talking about Web5, right, which is even more confusing. So what I'll do is give a general comment about Web3 and talk to you about why am I interested in this subject and all the new technology. So Web3 is this idea that you can own things that previously were owned by the companies that you registered for. So you can own the money, you can own the identity. You have a decentralized interest in things that previously were stuck in what we call a Web 2, Web 2 database, right? So if Web 1 was about reading things on the internet, and Web 2 was about writing things on the internet, like social media comments and whatnot, Web 3 is about owning things. It's fundamentally about owning things. And the reason why it's so interesting when it relates to identity is that, we don't own our identity. Let's face it, right? Facebook, Google, Yahoo, or Apple, all these companies own your identity. So when you go to log in, Steve, you typically will log in, we call it federated login. So you're logging in with Facebook or you're logging in with Google, right? So they aren't referencing, anything that you own, right? To pull down the identity. They're going, Google owns that identity. It's Google's identity. Now your name is there, but Google owns it, right? And so it's very troubling. And it really has been, I'm going to back up. I'm going to back up all the way to the beginning of the internet, right? And this is how I like to tell the story. When the internet was created, Steve, it was created, I call it the original sin, right? There's two original sins. The first original sin is that there was no identity created. The second original sin is that there was no money created, right? So let's deal with the identity. So the internet was created to connect a bunch of anonymous computers to each other. And that's what it does, right? TCP IP protocol. So it basically has been built around connecting anonymous machines into a network. Okay. So the reason you have 350 passwords, right? Or more, probably have 500. But the typical person has 350. The reason you have 350 passwords is that every place you log in, every website, every service has had to create its own identity layer, right? And so you have, your name and your digits, right? Your email address, and in some cases, a lot of personal information in 350 databases, right? The attack surface is so incredibly large. And that's why we have, 3 billion identities for sale on the dark web. That has fueled the problem of identity theft, right? It's, your identity is everywhere. It's everywhere, right? So what we're trying to do, right, is give rightful ownership of that identity back to the consumer. And there's been all these new standards, all these new protocols. I'm not going to go into detail, but there's all these new things that have happened that allow you today to own your identity and your identifiers in a wallet that is secure, right? Using cryptography, they can be verified anywhere, anytime, any place. And so this is an incredible renaissance for consumers, right? It's an incredibly exciting time. And the thing that follows this, Steve, is that your personal information has value. All that information that you give to all these different companies, right? They make billions of dollars on your information, right? So this trend of Web3 owning your information, and then it's all stored in a wallet. I'm not going to confuse people with a wallet, but you own it, and then at some point, you're the rightful owner of that data, and you should be able to make money on it, right? And you shouldn't, Google and Apple and all these other companies, they shouldn't make money on your data. You shouldn't. So that's where this is headed. That was a long answer. I'm sorry, Steve.
No, it was really great because it really kind of expands the fact that there's definitely a differentiation when it comes to talking about identity, and then talking about identity within Web3. And then even I think you had mentioned kind of Web5, which I think kind of blows my mind because here I am stuck on Web3. I had no idea there's a Web5.
Okay,
so
can I just make one comment about Web3, Web5? So Web3 really has been overrun with crypto and coins and NFT, right? So when people think of Web3, they think of all that financialization, right? So we've come up, a whole bunch of people have come up with this term Web5, Web2 plus Web3, Web2 plus Web3 equals Web5. And Web5 is only dedicated to the personal ownership of consumer data owned and controlled. And so when I like to use Web5, Steve, because the thing is, when you say Web5, everybody says, what is that? And that's the opportunity you have to say it's about consumer control, consumer owned personal data. And it's not about coins or crypto or NFTs. It's about you and your data, your relationship to that data.
Do you think that the concept of Web3 has kind of become overused to the sense that we tend to almost synonymously just kind of just blank out when we hear Web3? Is it just that there's just too much frenzy going on with things like cryptos and tokens and things like that, and not enough focus on identity? You're saying it tends to be more of crypto and NFTs and gamifications that does identity?
Yeah, I think that's right. The one thing that I'll tell you is that, I use the Web3, often, but you also know that I use Web5 because you're in my Web5, LinkedIn group. So the thing you have to do when you say Web3 identity, you have to hack your way through crypto, coins, NFTs. And then you get to this promised land where you can talk about a consumer's, relationship with their personal information, ownership and relationship with it. The beauty of Web5 is nobody knows what the hell Web5 is. So you get to start from zero, Steve, and you get to say, okay, this is a cool opportunity. Web5 is only about the consumer, their data, and their relationship with their data.
It's incredible. I mean, it really kind of does bring in the whole idea around kind of the holistic, the idea of self-sovereign. The data and permissions are fully controlled by the individual identity. And I guess the idea would be is that users really control it. And I think if I kind of encapsulate the philosophy is that, the users can really kind of port their data across different segments of applications, and then they can selectively kind of disclose information about themselves to whoever they want to at whenever they want to, right? So it is full data sovereignty.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, as I said, I know some of your audience isn't overly technical, so I'm not going to talk about zero knowledge proofs and, credentials and all this, verifiable presentations and whatnot. But the beauty of the new technology is that it allows you to prove things about yourself without disclosing a bunch of information. So, like, for example, let's talk about the physical identity system. Okay, let's just start there, because the physical identity system, this identity system that we all live in the physical world. The DMV issues you, they're the issuer of the driver's license. Okay, you're the holder of the driver's license. And then when you go to buy a beer or a pack of cigarettes, you present your driver's license to the verifier, right? So holder, issuer, verifier. So it's a triangle, right? And the verifier looks at the license and says, oh, this is issued by the California Department of Motor Vehicles. I trust it, right? Now, the reality is that, with all this new tech and AI, you don't know that you can trust it, right? Because who knows, right? So that physical identity system, that triangle, basically is the system that we use in this new data model, this new consumer data model. There are issuers of credentials, there are holders of credentials, and there are verifiers, relying parties, verifiers of credentials. And the beauty of this new system is that, a verifiable credential is not verifiable in the sense that, I could issue you a verifiable credential, Steve, that says you're 6'5", right? But you're not 6'5". I mean, maybe you are because you're sitting down, but you're not 6'5". So I haven't verified that you're 6'5". I've just put it into a credential, which can be cryptographically verified, using blockchain and other technology, right? So the beauty of this new system is that, I could give, the data is should be irrelevant. I could give all my data to everybody on the internet, right? But what's relevant is the verification of the data, right? So that's where we're hopefully going to get to, is a world where the data is sort of meaningless. It's the verification of the data that becomes important.
Now, walk me through a little bit of understanding how do we actually verify the entity? Are we leveraging something like a smart contract? Are we leveraging things such as blockchain? I mean, when you say kind of, how does that actually kind of work?
Right. Okay. So let's start at the very beginning. Okay. So we do a lot of identity verification. Okay. We can verify 16,000 different documents in almost every country. Okay. So we have a very smart system that looks at the physical document, does all this analysis on the physical document. You put some information in, your date of birth. We do some analysis. Then what we do is we have a very sophisticated system that proves that you're human and alive, a video system, and that it also proves that you are the person represented on the government issued ID. Okay. And if that checks out, that process typically takes about a minute and a half, right? And consumers are familiar with it. They've gone through it a million times now. So the beauty of it is that typically, Steve, that the consumer's relationship with that data is they have no more relationship with that data. That data then goes and sits in a database, right? Which gives you zero value. You can never, ever use that data again. And so what you have to then do, right, is you have to keep verifying and verifying your information everywhere you go, right? Uber just launched a rider verification. Airbnb, Meta, it's going to be insanity because there's going to be 100 different verification every platform, right? So that makes no sense because all we're doing is we're just recreating the system that the problem we're trying to solve, which is there's too much information out there. So the system that we have, right, basically creates what's called a verifiable credential. It sits in the consumer's wallet, and the consumer doesn't even necessarily know that they have this wallet, but it's this really cool Web3 wallet that's up in the cloud, and they have a key pair, and then they have to unlock the other key pair up on the cloud. So but don't get hung up on that because the consumer doesn't even really interact with their wallet that much. So that credential, that identity credential, now can be reused anywhere. So because it uses open identity standards, anybody that wants to integrate maybe 3 to 5 lines of code onto a web page can verify that credential. And the act of verification, basically, there's a few parts here. So the very first thing we do, Steve, is we make sure that we authenticate you and make sure that you have a wallet. And we do that through a phone number and what's called the OTP, one-time password. So we authenticate you as the rightful owner of a wallet. And then what we do is we say, we want to look for the Dentity identity credential. I want to look for the identity credential. So then the identity credential is presented, right? And let's say that there's 10 attributes of data on that credential, right? Your height, all this other kind of stuff. Well, you, the user, now have control, right? To say, you know what? I don't want this website to have all this information. So you now can go through and control what information you're giving to that website, right? So it's very different. Like in that example I gave you, Steve, all you have to do is prove you're 21. They don't need to know they don't need to know how your birth date. They don't need to know where you live. They don't need to know the color of your eyes or how tall you are or how much you weigh. So we're massively oversharing information, right? So this new system of digital identity basically allows you to prove things about yourself without spraying your data across the internet, right? And that's why it's privacy protective. It's secure, and that's why the system has been adopted by all the big companies.
Yeah, and it does. I mean, really, when you kind of use the analogy like you did, talking about driver's license, I think most people can really understand that concept. And one thing that I'm really trying to understand is really kind of around the role of centralization and decentralization. I think the shift into kind of more of the Web3 identity based, where the individual user has sovereignty over the data and the information they choose to share can be very selective. When you kind of look at some of the business models around some of the big tech companies, it seems like they would probably almost kind of find either. What are you seeing in terms of kind of they're adapting to this new change and fundamental philosophical shift into identity? Because it seems like they kind of own all the data. They own all the ability to kind of share that data. It seems like they would almost kind of it would almost be a power struggle over retaining that at some point, right?
Yeah. No, there is, right? There is, and consumers know that app tracking, right? You have the ability to not have the apps track you, right? So that's been a big hit to the big tech companies. And the other big hit is happening right now, and the cookie. The cookie that cookies you and follows you around and, says, hey, like you were looking at these sunglasses everywhere you go. Now you have to look at those sunglasses. It's annoying, right? And that's not what happens in the physical world, right? Like imagine going into a store and then you look at a shirt and then you go to the next door and then the sales guy comes with that shirt next door and he's banging on the window saying, how about this shirt, right? It makes no sense, right? So that whole system ultimately is going away. So Google is deprecating the cookie, right? So the cookie will go away, and web marketers are going to basically have to rely on the information. It's called zero-party data and first-party data. The information that you give them with permission to use, right? So this is fundamentally, a sea change, right? In a sea change. So the big tech companies, by the way, don't worry about the big tech companies. They'll be fine. I'm not worried about them. They'll get access to your information. They'll ask you for it, right? Basically what they'll do is they'll say, hey, in order to use Facebook, which is a free service, you have to give us all this information, right? And, so the next big wave here is lots of companies asking you for your data that previously were just taking your data, right? So this is going to be the new trend. They're going to be asking you for your data, and you can choose to give it to them or not give it to them. But the thing I'll tell you is that, they may choose to not allow you to use some of their services if you don't give them your data, right? So this will be the next big fight. As it relates to centralization versus decentralization, all this data, for 20 years, 30 years, it's just been sitting up in their databases, right? And what happens, Steve? You're a DevOps guy. You know this better than anybody. What happens to that data? What always happens to that data? No, but it gets hacked, right? It gets hacked. It's, of course, I mean, there's billions of records for sale, right? It's because those data records are not secure. They're not secure. I don't care what, you could put them in Fort Knox. There's always going to be somebody that can figure out a way to get that data. Now, the beauty of the new decentralized method of data storage, right, versus the centralized method of data storage, is that in order for the bad guys to get, the personal information of 1 million users, they have to crack 1 million different wallets, right? And, we use what's called AES 256 encryption, right? Which is the same encryption standard that the Department of Defense uses for top secret information. According to Microsoft and the Department of Defense, it would take you 100 years to crack that code. Okay, so you're gonna crack, it's gonna take you 100 years to crack the code of 1 million wallets. Have fun, right? Go at it, right? So my point is that the method of storage in the new ecosystem, this decentralized ecosystem, is far more protective than centralized data storage, right? And so that's the benefit to the consumer. They're going to have more security over their information.
It definitely does. It does present some real key features when it comes to things like privacy, security, and enhancement of protecting that identity. Where I might see a little bit of a struggle is the average, normal, everyday consumer understanding how they can then kind of go about obtaining a wallet. It seems like it really it favors more of the people who tends to be tech savvy. How do we start to see kind of the landscape shifting in terms of wider adoption with more awareness, understanding of how the wallets work with easier interoperability?
So this is what we're focused on, and this is the genius of Dentity, right? So the consumer doesn't want another wallet, right? I mean, they don't want another wallet, like they've got their Apple Wallet, Google Wallet, right? So what you have to do is abstract all this technology, a Web3 wallet, asymmetric cryptography, the blockchain. People don't wake up in the morning and say, I want to be decentralized today, Steve. They say, I want to sell something on Facebook, or I want to buy something on Craigslist, or I have somebody coming over to walk my dog and I'm concerned that, I want to know who they are. Those are the everyday problems that people want to solve, right? And Web3 tech is brilliant at solving them, right? Now, the problem is that, and this is no offense to you because you're a technologist, is that technologists think it's a technology problem. It's not a technology problem. It's a user adoption problem, right? And so what we're focused on at Dentity, I mean, we have brilliant tech. We have many, many patents, brilliant tech, and, a dozen engineers working on open identity standards for 3 years, right? It's a lot of work. So, but we don't present that. We present a very simple, user interface and workflow to the consumer. And the reality is 90% of the consumers don't even know they have a wallet because we don't call it a wallet, right? It's just this place where, you have access to your credentials. You can reference them and unlock them by using your phone number. And consumer may never even go to their identity wallet. In fact, we don't even call it a wallet anymore. And you know what? We don't even call all these little things credentials anymore. We call them passes, because people are used to passes, right? They have passes in their Apple Wallet, right? So part of it is that we as technology people, right? We're so obsessed with the technology. We basically, we smoke what we roll, right? So, we have to get off that. And by the way, it took us a long, we've been around for 3 years, right? This is our third version. We just launched a big, user interface update, and we were hammering the wallet for 3 years. We thought the wallet was the most important thing. It was featured in all the apps and everything. We don't even, it's gone now. The wallet is gone, right? Like, do away with the wallet. Consumers don't want another wallet, in my view, right? And they tell us this, like, they don't want another wallet. What do they need another wallet for? They don't have any use for the wallet.
So it seems like you guys are kind of abstracting, kind of more of the technical hurdles that most people would tend to go to get kind of a Web3 identity, and making it more as an easy to kind of, identity as a service, where users or consumers can simply say, look, I want a centralized place that has all of the bells and whistles, that be able to kind of gives me all the technical features, but I don't understand, and really just kind of presents it to me in an easy to use interface, right? Because
Right.
That's
exactly right.
Having to learn these things, it's very difficult.
No, you got it exactly right. And what I will tell you about Dentity is we have 85-year-old, grandmothers that get through this process every single day. Like, it's incredible to me, right? It's incredible to me that people, that aren't digital natives, right, are getting through the most complicated technology ever. Like, our technology is like world-class ID tech, world-class, right? And 85-year-old, grandmothers can get through our system no problem. In 2 minutes, by the way, it takes.
Yeah, I was going to say the baby boomers that are basically kind of nearing retirement, right, is like, they're now kind of being washed in this new technical world, right, of identity and Web3, and even some things that might be kind of a limitation to them in terms of the understanding is frightening, I think, in some aspects. So it's great that you've been able to do that, and it's amazing that you mentioned the 85-year-old is able to kind of do this with ease. I'd love to see this on a mass adoption level kind of increase. Where do you see the next 5 years happening? I don't want to say 5 to 10, but where do you kind of see consumers kind of meeting, and where do you see this consumer push in the next 5 years?
Right. So my focus is on adoption, and my focus is solving real world problems, not very niche Web3 problems. So let me give you an example. A big investor in our company is AARP. They have 38 million members, Steve. The AARP has more members than crypto holders in the US. It's just massive, right? So they invested in Dentity because they're concerned and focused on elder financial crime and abuse, romance scams, things like this. And they understand that identity is the through line. If you can't figure out, a way to get identity in the hands of consumers and for them to be able to exchange it, and make it social, right? Then it's useless, right? Because look, you're never going to get 1 billion people verified, right? By relying on Facebook and Google and all the big tech. You just won't. And there's a couple of reasons why. First, it's not in their interests, right? They have business models. They don't want to verify every single person that onboards into their system. They just don't. That's not their business model, right? They want, you may have heard the same stat, but I always hear the stat that 80% of the ads on TikTok are consumed by bots, by technology. So 80% of every ad that you serve on TikTok, if you're an advertiser, publisher, it's being seen by a bot, right? So that just tells you the size and scale of the problem, right? And AI presents all these incredible challenges about identity, right? Deep fakes and all this other stuff, right? So the thing that we have to focus on is finding use cases. We call them use cases. Finding problems that are real problems that vex, that vex consumers, and then using our tech to solve them. I'll give you an example. We have an exclusive relationship with the largest Facebook marketplace sellers group. There's 20,000 sellers in this group, 20,000. And we are working every day, right, to work with the sellers to get them to understand how you verify people, how you build counterparty trust, And this is like, I always say that it's, if you want to create a network, it's easier to create a network in a classroom than it is in a football field, right? And so we have, hundreds, because we just started this relationship, but hundreds of people in that group that are verifying each other, verifying buyers, right? And it'll disperse out that way. So the way this rolls out, Steve, is for us to solve real world problems, right? The consumers actually care about. Do it without putting the technology front and center, right? And not making it, Web3 or saying it's blockchain or a credential, right? And just giving consumers access to all this technology. And then over time, right, it spreads. So the one thing that I would also tell you is that, to my previous point, consumers, they have the lowest trust ever in all these on big tech and social media. 80% of consumers today don't trust social media with their data. They just don't, right? So they're not going to give more of their personal data to the social media giants and big tech. They just won't, right? They just won't. So the best way to do this is to make it decentralized, to make every consumer basically verify a relying party and do it to each other, because then you have millions and millions and millions of people, billions of people verifying each other. Then it just spreads, right? We don't have to sit in line and queue up for, to get our identity verified by Meta or Facebook, And by the way, if you do that, it's of zero value to you. It's sitting up in their database. Like, what good is that? You can't use it. You can't use it. You're going to pay $15 a month to have a little blue check mark that that. And then, by the way, you have to then go to every single platform you go to. You have to do it again. It's useless. So reusable digital identity, owned by the consumer, controlled by the consumer, more privacy protective. They decide what information they give to whom, and it's safer. It's safer than putting it in a centralized database.
Yeah, and that's, I think it's incredibly powerful. Is that is that the idea of having everything decentralized. The reducing the surface attack of reducing it now to basically now millions of identities. You now have to attack a million different type of individuals versus just one individual type of place. It's incredible. And I think it's very, very empowering for users. And I highly advocate for our listeners to go out there, check out what Jeff's working with at Dentity. Jeff, how can our listeners, understand more around what Dentity is doing and how it can protect them? Give us a little bit of idea of kind of like some of the things that Dentity can really help them with. How can they get involved?
Well, first of all, Dentity is free to the consumer. So go to Dentity, DENTITY.com, just like identity without the I, Dentity.com, and sign up. It'll take you 2 minutes, and your information will be safe and secure. Then go into the app. It's a web app, which means that you're not going to find it in the App Store. It's on the internet. Then go into your Dentity account and start verifying people, right? Like we have a point system and all this other fun kind of gamification and all this other fun stuff. But go in and start verifying, people. Get comfortable sending verification requests. It's super easy to do by email or SMS. Then what I would say is, I have service providers coming to my home all the time. People working domestically in the house and, in the yard, whatnot. I don't let a single person on my property without verifying their identity, period, hands down. There's a lot of bad people out there, Steve, a lot of bad people. We see them every day. Bad people trying to do bad things to good people. And they want to do it, getting a fake identity, right? What I would say is, like, anytime you're trying to create trust with somebody remotely or online, send them a verification request, right? And, in my experience of doing this for a few years, if they don't do that, if they don't accept it, beware. Just have your eyes wide open, because a lot of times the bad people, and have you ever posted something lately on Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace? It's insane, Steve. Do it just so you understand the magnitude of the problem, right? Do it. I ask you to do it. You will get overrun instantly with 25 requests for your Zelle account, your phone number, your PayPal account. And there's all these scams out there, right? There's bad people. And by the way, it's not domestic anymore. It's completely internationalized, right? And the problem is that, you have all these federal agents. These people are doing it basically in plain daylight out, in Southeast Asia and Northern Africa and all these other places. they can't stop them, right? And they're coming after you. They're coming after your mom, and they're coming after your grandfather, and they're coming after you. They're trying to steal your information, and they're going to scam the shit out of you. They're going to take your money, and they're going to steal your identity, and you know, it's bad. So just be aware. There's bad people out there, and you know, I'm not even talking about all the bad stuff that happens to women and children and minorities. And you know, do you know that there was 21 million reported cases to the National Center for Missing and Abused Children, and a lot of those cases now are online grooming, like huge, more than half of them. It's online. It's bad people trying to groom, you know, young kids online. It's disgusting. And so we all, this is my pitch here now, Steve. We all have a role here. We all have to stand up. We all have to stand up for identity, verified identity, together, right? It's free. It takes 2 minutes, right? We all have to stand up for it. Otherwise, you know, particularly with AI, otherwise it's just going to continue to get worse, you know, and all the trust that we're trying to build online and all this digital commerce stuff that we do, like it's all going to go to shit, because trust is the essence of commerce. Without trust, there is no commerce.
Yeah,
right?
I 100% agree with that. I think the key takeaway there is that, you know, is that consumers have to get involved. They've got to get engaged with basically getting an identity that they can then verify through something like Identity, and then start basically reaching out to people to join their network and get verified that way. I think kind of as people start to get on board with that, you start to see that adoption curve go up. I think that's a win-win for consumers and for entities as well too. Wow, that's incredible stuff, Jeff. I can't.
Yeah, like if you, I mean, it's powerful, right, Steve? Like if you want to bitch about, you know, hate speech and all, and you want to bitch about identity theft, and you want to bitch about a lack of civility, you know, on social media, if you want to bitch about all these things, and you know, online consumer scams, and you know, financial, if you want to bitch about it, you have a responsibility to stand up and do something. And you know, we've been doing this 3 years now, and you know, we'll have millions of people on the app, you know, using the system. And this, by the way, you know, we haven't made a single penny. We don't charge consumers, right? And we charge businesses, right? You know, we have hundreds of businesses that use it. We charge them. But my point is that this is a mission-driven company, right? And consumers, you know, that if they want to complain about all the malignancies and bad shit that happens on the internet, then they have a responsibility to do something, right? And finally, now you can do something like, you know, create virality around verified identity, right? Like if everybody's verified, Steve, you know, people say bad things with their username. They don't say it with their name. They just don't, right? So all these bad people doing bad stuff on the internet, ultimately this stuff will go away, because they're, you know, they hide. They're cowards, right? They're cowards.
It's taken away the
let's go after
taken away
them.
the anonymity of it, right? They're no longer hiding behind just a ghost username. It's kind of like, you know, your identity can be verified, so you need to really need to kind of hone in on just the identities that are verified. So it seems like that's kind of the powerful takeaway is moving into kind of an environment, or kind of a kind of an ecosystem where everyone's identified, everyone's verified, and everyone then you can't hide anymore. Very, very powerful stuff. It's amazing. Jeff, what are some of the projects you're working on? Where can we follow you?
Yeah. I'm not a big social media guy. I think you probably know that, but I am very active on LinkedIn. So follow me on LinkedIn. I'm always publishing, and Steve is always jumping in and, you know, jumping in on my posts, which is great. I love that. So follow me on LinkedIn, but you know, I'll give you just a bunch of examples of this kind of stuff we're doing. So, if you're a notary, right? We work with the National Notary Association. There's about 120,000 notaries in the U.S. that do 100% of mortgages in America. Those notaries every year, they have to have their notary commission verified, they have to have their background checked, and they have to have their identity verified, right? So we're out there trying to prevent notary fraud. You know, a lot of people see this legal advertising on TV, right? There's $2.5 billion spent on legal advertising, right? All those calls go into these digital intake centers around the country, and we do, you know, and then by the way, they're going to release your medical records, right? Because, you know, you sign the contract and then they release your med records. So we do all that compliance to make sure that, you know, people aren't basically saying they're you and then having your medical records, you know, released, right? So that's a good use case. We do, you know, if you're buying vape or tobacco or something like that online, you have to be 21. There's age-gated products. We do that. we're very active in the music festivals around the country, proving that you're 21. We do a lot of stuff like, trying to make sure that kids aren't smoking and buying age-gated products. We do fun stuff like, a lot of the venues, don't issue tickets now, they issue these credentials, right? It's a fun business because the technology is so incredibly diverse. And the technology, Steve, as I said in the beginning, is not just about your identifiers, it's about community, right? So we have companies and organizations, that are big organizations building community in this sort of Web3 space using these credentials. I wish I had one around here, but this plastic membership card, this thing is useless, right? Useless. So all these plastic cards that you walk around with in your leather wallet, like all that's going away, right? It's all going to sit up in some Web3 wallet and allow you to prove information about yourself, in a privacy respecting way.
That's going to be really cool because I know that it will definitely probably take about 4 pounds off of the weight that I carry in my wallet with just cards and identification and everything like that. And really cool to be able to kind of have everything verified through either an app or something, some sort of digital identity on your phone. Jeff, I can't thank you again. This has been an amazing conversation. I know our listeners have definitely been enlightened by this topic. Would love to have you on again. Can't thank you enough to help shed light on this conversation. A big shout out for you and Dentity. Can't thank you enough for this.
Cool, Steve. Well, I appreciate it. And I appreciate the very good work that you do on LinkedIn, enlightening the users. And I appreciate this podcast, which, I like this podcast, Steve, because it's not so technical, where there's so many hardcore technical podcasts everywhere. This gives us an opportunity to talk about this stuff to a consumer audience, a real world, explain it in real simple, easy terms. So I appreciate you. And I thank you for having me on today.
Absolutely. Look forward to it. And happy travels, everyone. Thanks for listening. Jeff, we'll chat soon. Cheers, everyone.
Thanks so much for listening to the Tech Travels Podcast with Steve Woodard. Please tune in next time and be sure to follow us and subscribe on the Apple Podcast and Spotify platforms. We'll see you next time.